November 1883, the Riverside Mill in Manchester, 11:15 at night. The day shift has been over for hours. Only the night cleaners remain, 3 men sweeping cotton dust from between the looms, their brooms scratching against worn floorboards. The machinery sleeps. The only sounds are the hiss of cooling steam pipes and the distant clatter of a night train crossing the viaduct. Then, metal on metal, a grinding sound from the far wall. All 3 men stop. They know that sound. It's the freight elevator, the platform they use to haul raw cotton bales up from the ground floor, finished cloth down to the loading bay. But the mill is empty. No one called for it. The chain begins to move, link by link, pulling upward through the guide wheel. The platform rises from the ground floor, passes the first floor landing where the men stand frozen, continues to the second floor and stops. Perfect silence. One of the cleaners, Thomas Brewster, would later tell the mill supervisor he watched the whole thing. The ropes were taut. The counterweight descended smoothly. The platform locked into place at the second floor as if someone had pulled the brake lever. But the second floor was dark, empty. The only thing up there was stacked burlap and a broken spinning frame waiting for repair. No one went near the elevator for the rest of the night. The Riverside lift wasn't new even then. Installed in 1871, it was one of the mill's first attempts to mechanize vertical transport. Before that, everything moved by hand hoist and human muscle. The engineering was ambitious, maybe too ambitious. It ran on a hybrid system, a cast iron counterweight for balance, but also a steam assist cylinder that could provide extra lifting force when loads were heavy. The brake was a friction shoe that clamped against a vertical rail, simple in theory, temperamental in practice. The whole mechanism was housed in a wooden shaft lined with brick, and the air inside always smelled of machine oil and damp mortar. The workers called it the sulking lift. It had moods. Sometimes it would refuse to move at all. The brake seized tight no matter how hard you pulled the release lever. Other times it would descend so smoothly, so silently, that you'd barely realize you were moving until you felt the floor meet your boots. And then there were the nights when it moved by itself. Not every night, not predictably, but often enough that the stories accumulated. A spinner named Margaret Holt swore she saw it rise 3 floors while she was walking past the shaft entrance. No load on the platform, no one at the controls. A maintenance man claimed he heard the chain moving at 2 in the morning when he was the only person in the building, checking for steam leaks. Another worker, name lost to time, reported that the lift once stopped between floors and stayed there for 6 hours, ignoring every attempt to call it up or down, before suddenly resuming its journey as if nothing had happened. The foreman, a pragmatic man named William Corby, dismissed it all as superstition and poor memory. But even Corby avoided using the lift after dark. By 1883, the machine's reputation was established. It wasn't haunted exactly. Workers didn't speak of ghosts or spirits, but they spoke of something stranger, a machine that seemed to make decisions, a machine that didn't always obey. Here's what nobody understood at the time. Early industrial lifts existed in a space between control and chaos. They weren't elevators as we know them today, precise, predictable, governed by electric motors and fail-safe systems. They were mechanical negotiations between weight, pressure, friction, and heat. Take thermal expansion. The Riverside lift used a wrought iron counterweight suspended on steel chains. During the day, when the mill ran hot steam engines running, hundreds of workers generating body heat, friction from belt-driven machinery warming the air, those chains expanded. Not much, maybe a few millimeters over their full length, but enough. As the chains lengthened, the counterweight dropped slightly, and when a counterweight drops, the platform wants to rise. If the brake wasn't set perfectly, if there was even a fraction of clearance between the friction shoe and the rail, the platform could drift upward. Slowly, silently, especially at night when the mill cooled and the system tried to find equilibrium. Then there was the steam assist cylinder, a vertical piston that could push the platform upward when loads were heavy. It drew steam from the mill's main boiler system, and that system wasn't constant. Pressure fluctuated. When other machines shut down for the night, pressure in the lines could spike. That extra pressure could extend the piston just enough to shift the platform, even with no one operating the controls. The brake was its own problem. It was a leather-faced shoe that pressed against a vertical steel rail. Leather absorbs moisture. Manchester is a wet city. The air inside the mill shaft was humid, especially in autumn and winter. Damp leather loses friction. If the brake was set while the leather was dry, then later absorbed moisture and became slick, the shoe could slip. The platform would drift. You'd hear nothing until the chain caught on the next gear tooth. And there was imbalance. Workers didn't always clear the platform at the end of the day. Sometimes a crate of bobbins was left behind, or a stack of folded cloth. That weight changed the system's equilibrium. A platform loaded with 200 pounds on one side but nothing on the other creates a torque. Combined with thermal expansion and a damp brake, that torque could overcome resistance. Finally, resonance. The mill ran on steam engines that drove dozens of machines through belt systems. Those engines created vibrations that traveled through the building's frame. If the frequency matched the natural frequency of the lift's suspension system, even a small, constant vibration could accumulate energy. Like pushing a swing, small pushes, timed right, create large motion. None of this was supernatural. But to workers in 1883, watching a platform rise through an empty shaft, it looked like intention. It looked like the machine was thinking. By January 1884, men were refusing night shifts. Not officially, you couldn't tell a foreman you were afraid of a freight lift, but through excuses. Illness, family obligations, anything to avoid being alone in the mill after dark. The women were more direct. A group of spinners, led by Margaret Holt, told Corby they wouldn't work past 8 o'clock if it meant using the lift. They'd haul cloth down the stairs if they had to. Corby threatened to dock their pay. They told him to go ahead. Then came the incident in March. A shipping clerk named Peter Grimshaw was moving a crate of finished broadcloth to the ground floor. Heavy crate, maybe 300 pounds on the platform with him. He pulled the brake release, began descending, and somewhere between the first floor and the ground floor, the platform stopped. Not gradually, suddenly, like something grabbed it. Grimshaw waited. He tried the brake release again, nothing. He shouted for help. The night foreman, hearing him, tried to operate the controls from the ground floor. The platform didn't respond. It hung there, suspended for nearly 20 minutes. Then it dropped. Not a free fall, the counterweight and chains prevented that, but a sudden, lurching descent that knocked Grimshaw off his feet. The crate shifted, tipped, and tumbled off the platform, crashing through the wooden safety gate at the ground floor landing. Grimshaw himself was unharmed, but the crate split open, and 60 yards of dyed wool spilled across the loading bay. The mill's owner, a man named Samuel Ashford, ordered an inspection. A mechanic examined the brake mechanism and found the leather shoe worn smooth on one side, barely making contact with the rail. He replaced it. Problem solved, supposedly. But the inspectors didn't find what the workers knew. A weaver named John Milbank swore the lift reacted to sound. He claimed that if you walked heavily near the shaft, the platform would shudder. If you shouted near the opening, sometimes the chains would creak. Other workers dismissed this, but Milbank insisted. He said the lift was listening. Sarah Dobbs, one of the night cleaners, had a different theory. She believed the lift moved when it was watched. If you stood at the shaft opening and stared at the platform, it would stay still. But if you turned away, even for a moment, it would drift. She admitted this sounded absurd, but she tested it, she said, multiple times. Corby, the foreman, decided to end the superstition himself. One night in April, he stayed late deliberately, publicly, and rode the lift up and down for an hour, all floors, multiple trips. He operated the brake, tested the controls, and documented everything. The lift behaved perfectly. At midnight, he wrote in the mill's logbook, "Freight lift operates within normal parameters. No anomalies observed." Then he left, locked the mill behind him. At 6 the next morning, when the day's shift arrived, the lift was on the top floor. No one had called it. The brake was set, and on the platform, according to 3 separate witnesses, was a coil of rope that hadn't been there the night before. No one could explain where it came from. In 1923, a mechanical engineer named Arthur Pemberton published a paper on early industrial lift systems. He'd spent years examining maintenance records from textile mills across northern England, including Riverside. His conclusion was precise. Most anomalous lift behavior, reported between 1870 and 1900, was caused by poorly understood thermodynamic and mechanical interactions. Pemberton identified what he called drift conditions, combinations of temperature change, pressure variation, moisture, and load imbalance that caused lifts to move without human input. He calculated that a 5-degree temperature drop could cause enough chain expansion to move a counterweight balance platform up to 2 feet. He demonstrated that steam pressure fluctuations of just 3 psi could extend assist cylinders enough to overcome friction brakes. He also noted something else. These systems were self-correcting, but slowly. A platform that drifted upward due to thermal expansion would eventually drift back down as temperatures stabilized. But that correction might take hours. To workers arriving in the morning, the lift would appear to have moved overnight for no reason. The rope on the platform, almost certainly left by a worker who forgot it, or placed there by someone as a prank. Pemberton's research found dozens of cases where mysterious objects appeared on platforms, tools, rags, lunch pails, always with mundane explanations once investigated. But here's what Pemberton couldn't measure: the psychological weight of working alongside machines you didn't fully understand. These were people who'd grown up in a world of hand tools and animal power. Within a single generation, they were surrounded by steam engines, mechanical lifts, power looms, devices that moved with inhuman strength and operated according to principles invisible to the eye. When a machine behaved unpredictably, it wasn't just mechanical failure. It was a reminder of how little control you actually had. The Riverside lift was decommissioned in 1891 and replaced with a modern hydraulic system. The old mechanism was dismantled and sold for scrap. No records survive of what happened to the counterweight, the chains, or the steam assist cylinder. But the stories survived, passed from workers to apprentices, from one generation to the next. And in those stories, the lift wasn't just broken, it was something more. A machine that moved when no one was looking. A machine that made decisions. Which, in a way, it did, just not the way anyone thought. Early industrial machinery operated in the space between human intention and physical law. Engineers designed these systems, but they didn't always understand them. Workers operated them but couldn't predict them. And the machines themselves, built from iron and leather and steam, found their own equilibrium, their own rhythms, their own ways of moving through the world. The Riverside lift didn't move on its own because it was haunted. It moved because it was subject to forces no one had bothered to measure: temperature, humidity, vibration, time. It was doing exactly what physics demanded. But to the people who worked beside it, who heard it creak to life in an empty mill, who watched it rise through darkness, it felt like something else. It felt like the machine was alive. And maybe, in the only way that mattered to them, it was.